Welcome to another episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast, the show where we dive deep into the people, places, and stories shaping life here in the Ozarks. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn. Today, we're joined by Fayetteville Mayor Molly Rawn as she reflects on her first year in office and breaks down the city's ambitious 2026 bond proposal, a $375.5 million plan to fund critical infrastructure and community projects with, I might add, all without raising taxes. We talk about what's at stake, how the bond connects to housing and growth, and why now is the time for Fayetteville residents to invest in their own progress. Whether you're a longtime local or new to the region, this conversation is essential listening if you care about the future of our city.
It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey, Mayor Rawn, welcome to the podcast.
Hey there. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I have to say that this is the first time that I've actually had a elected official on the podcast in any of the four cities. So I'm really honored that it's you, and that, of course, I live in Fayetteville. So, I am a Fayettevillean, and it's kind of special to have you on.
Well, I am honored that it's me, and I wish that I would not have known that, because now the pressure's on. I've got to represent well and do a really good job.
Absolutely. And so, it's funny, after 400 plus episodes, it's, in 7 years of doing this, there's always room for somebody else to tell a story. So I'm really interested to hear from you. And I'd love maybe if you could just kind of share with our audience, after just wrapping up your first year in office, you're no longer a rookie mayor. What have been the biggest lessons or surprises in your first year, and how has that prepared you for tackling a major initiative like this bond proposal that we're going to discuss today?
So one of the things, I don't know that it would be fair to characterize it as a surprise. I would say it was really reaffirmed what I believed to be true, and that is about the city staff. The team at the city of Fayetteville, top to bottom, across all departments, is really incredible. I get to work with some of the brightest, most talented, most creative people that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. And that, while not a surprise, it's not as if I didn't already know there were great people working at the city, but just being around it every single day and having that, the environment in which I get to go to work in, has been something really, really special.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And certainly I've had a chance. I've lived in Fayetteville all 11 years that I've been here in Northwest Arkansas, and I've seen this city evolve, and it continues to grow. And I'm always amazed, even with my limited interactions with people that actually work at the city, everybody that I've come in contact with is just simply amazing.
It's really wonderful, and not just good at their own jobs, but really capable of seeing the bigger picture. I talk to department heads from all facets of our organization, and they're all very invested in what we're doing as a whole, not just in what's in their narrow scope or their purview, but really that broader vision for the whole city. They all have that sense of investment in what we do. It's pretty special.
Yeah, it definitely is. And so I'm glad that we are getting a chance to kind of talk about that. This episode, so that everyone is clear listening to this, is really about us discussing this bond initiative and what it represents. Can you just maybe walk us through the historical aspect of what inspired the 1 cent, 1 city, 1 purpose campaign, and what message are you hoping to send to Fayetteville residents?
Yeah, I'm wanting to send the message that this is really, really important, and not just for those of us that are living in Fayetteville now, but for Fayettevilleans well into the future, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. This is one of those items, one of those initiatives that we are going to look back on, I believe, as a turning point for our city. And the inspiration, really, I think that's the word you used. I wish I could say it was inspiration. I'm going to say it's more necessity. I mean, there are critical pieces of infrastructure that we must fund. And municipalities in the state of Arkansas don't have as many avenues as my peer mayors in other states have to be able to fund things. Sales tax bonds are really the best mechanism we have. And so knowing that we have a short timeline in which we need to implement some of these things, it became really, really important for us to act quickly. But I also want to go back. I'm now editing what I said. Randy, you said inspiration. And I will say that for many of these initiatives, the inspiration has come from the people of Fayetteville.
Yeah.
So, for example, the Aquatic Center, which I know we're going to touch on later in the episode, so many surveys and public engagement sessions and one-on-one listening sessions with individuals in the community led to us realizing that that was really in response to what people wanted. So critical infrastructure needs and also inspiration taken from listening to the people that live here.
Yeah. Well, and we are going to talk about the Aquatic Center. Can you maybe walk us through some of the most critical infrastructure needs that exist? And maybe, again, the quality of life projects included in this bond? Because as I read through all 9 of the items, all of them apply to me in one way or the other.
Yeah.
And it's like, I drink water in the city of Fayetteville.
Yes.
I use the sewer system. We have animals. I mean, there's just a little bit of everything that is represented in this bond. And so
there is, and it impacts every single person who lives in our city, regardless of your political affiliations or your job or your socioeconomic background. Everyone needs safe and clean drinking water, and everyone needs our sewer system to work. I can promise you that's not something that we want to allow to fail. Everybody needs to be able to flush the toilet. And so these do apply to everyone who lives here. And the ones that are the quality of life amenities like the Aquatic Center and the Parks and Recreation, those, whether you use them or not, those impact you because they bring in economic activity in terms of dollars of people that are visiting here and spending money here.
Yeah.
And they're also talent recruitment and retention tools. So I'm happy to go through all 9 if you want, and that's the way you want to go it, or you tell me.
Well, yeah. And I think it's important. I mean, you just brought up a lot of points. People don't realize that something's a problem until it is a problem.
Exactly.
And it's one of those things where I know we could make an argument for anything. So like if you don't own pets, then you're not as concerned about the animal issue. If you don't swim, or maybe you're afraid of water, then you're maybe not as concerned about the pool or the aquatic center issue. But we live in the second largest town in the state of Arkansas, and it's continuing to grow. I don't see any abatement in the number of people moving to Fayetteville, much less Northwest Arkansas as a whole. I think originally when I started doing this podcast, it was around 30 to 35 new people a day were moving here. Now it's 40 people a day moving to Northwest Arkansas. So any infrastructure that we have in any of the 4 pillar cities in Northwest Arkansas are all going to require some fortification in order to be able to deal with this demand, this increased demand of new residents moving to the area.
Absolutely. And, I couldn't help but think about when you were talking about roads and transportation. I mean, people who have heard me speak about this bond issue have heard me say that national surveys that go out across the country, red states, blue states, purple states, everything in between, when residents are asked about determinants on their quality of life, there is one answer that comes up every single time across the board. It's the highest percentage of respondents say that this one factor is what determines and impacts their quality of life. Would you like to guess what it is?
Please tell me. I have no idea.
Traffic.
Okay.
People again and again and again say that when there is increased traffic, it has a negative impact on their quality of life.
Oh, absolutely.
And so,
I don't know why I didn't think of that.
Some of these dollars go towards, a large amount of them actually go towards infrastructure improvements on our roadways. Not only making it, there's a question that's about pedestrian infrastructure, right? Making that safer for people that are walking or not using a car. But like the second or third largest amount in the bond, question 6, is for transportation and road improvements. So I want to make sure that you can get from one end of our city to the other in a safe way and it not take too long. That's a detriment to your quality of life. And that's really important. So that's a part of this as well.
And I believe, so part of that is the Greenway expansion included in that as well, or some of the additional aspects that are going to run, I think, east to west?
So that's a great question. So question 6, transportation and road improvements, is specifically just about the roads that you are driving on.
Okay.
It's about for cars. However, you know that public transportation is important to me. This year in the city's budget, we've increased it by 40%, and I'm hoping we can continue kind of that level of growth for the next several years. Those transportation and road improvements are also going to help our public transit providers. But that is question 6. In terms of trails, that is a different question. And the pedestrian pathways and trails is question 5. And the focus here is really on maintaining what we have. And I think it's important for people to know that in terms of this bond package, when they hear trails, this is not funding towards the mountain bike trails and the recreational soft surface trails that we have, like out at Kessler and Centennial Park. Those are amazing and wonderful. Yeah. That is not what we are asking you to fund. These are about sidewalks and trails where people are walking, and our hard surface paved trails, making sure we are maintaining them, because you can't continue to grow the way we have in our trail system over the past several years if we don't have projects to maintain. And so this year is more about a maintenance rather than expansion on the trail side. I think what you were talking about when you said east-west, Fayetteville has a lack of east-west connectors. If you want to get north and south in Fayetteville, it's relatively easy.
Yeah.
If you want to get east to west, it's a little bit harder. And so we definitely have those east to west connectors in mind as high priority projects to use our bond funds for, at least within the road department.
Yeah. Well, and that would include both the trails or for bikes as well as for cars. So
mainly just in that question 6, it is just about highway. That is, or you may mean on-street bike lanes.
On-street, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So I think that's important. A lot of times people talk about trails and they sort of use that to mean synonymous with dirt bike trail or mountain bike trails.
Oh, yeah.
On-street trails and then the Greenway trails. So yes, forgive me. Those road improvements also include that on-street, what we would call on-street infrastructure. If you are riding, on the road in your bike, absolutely making sure those lanes are there and well cared for. Yeah. I didn't understand. I'm sorry.
It's fine. And that's, for people that are maybe trying to get from Gregg over to Garland and some of those, it just makes it so much easier. And I've ridden on those beforehand and then after, as they've started to expand some of that, and it makes a huge difference.
It's the difference between whether you're going to use it or not.
Yeah. And whether you're safe or not.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah. No. So, okay. Well, I want to talk about something that is, of course, I hate to admit this. I read social media. I listen to my neighbors talk and I hear people, and one of the big issues that comes up is how is like something like this bond proposal directly supporting like affordable housing and future growth from that perspective, right?
That's a really great question. Question 2 on the bond initiative is upgrades for our water and sewer department, specifically the wastewater treatment plant. Fayetteville is lucky in that we have 2 wastewater treatment plants, but specifically the Nolan plant needs upgrades, significant upgrades to be able to manage the sewer capacity that we know is going to be coming to Fayetteville in future years. So we talked earlier, it's not glamorous, it's not sexy, but you talked about, everyone flushes the toilet. And as you get more and more people who live in Fayetteville, more and more people are flushing the toilet. And so to be able to plan for that future growth, we have to have upgrades to those facilities. The other thing about housing in particular is you can talk about more housing units all day long. If you don't have the infrastructure to support them, they are not going to get built. And so if we don't have adequate water and adequate sewer capacity, we'll never be able to grant the permits to build more housing, affordable or otherwise, just any housing. And so we've seen several communities in Northwest Arkansas and also communities across the country that essentially have a moratorium on housing development. And it's not because they don't have builders who want to build it. It's not because they don't have people who need those homes. And it's not because they don't have, banks that are ready to lend. It is because they don't have the infrastructure in the ground, namely water and sewer, but also roads to be able to have that, to be able to support that. And so I want to always talk about housing. That is always at the forefront of my mind. This has to happen first in order for us to get there.
Yeah. And I think it's also important for people to understand. I mean, you shared that a lot of times it's how do you connect the dots for why one thing happens versus something else. And I think a lot of people need to understand purely from a housing perspective, the United States is still playing catch up from the 2008 meltdown.
Yeah, 100%.
And like literally we're a couple of million homes behind the 8 ball when it comes to creating more housing, whether it's affordable or market rate. And so I think anytime that there's an opportunity for us to make a smoother pathway to creating more housing, that's something that we need to, as a citizenry, we need to really consider.
Absolutely. And it doesn't mean, as my dad was always fond of saying, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Right. So one of the most critical things that we can do to allow for new housing is the infrastructure piece. That doesn't mean that there aren't also other things within our policies, within our land use plans, within our permitting speed, and within social housing and work with nonprofit partners. That doesn't mean that the city isn't also doing those things.
Yeah.
The sales tax bond is the right vehicle to fund that infrastructure piece. There's certainly still work happening on those other pieces of getting more housing as well.
Yeah. And I do want to mention that the city of Fayetteville you've kind of put your money where your mouth is. You've hired a housing person that works exclusively towards this issue, which not every city has done.
Yeah.
And I think that's at least getting us in that right direction of thinking about what does housing look like for Fayetteville moving forward for the next 15, 20, 30 years, because it's just we have to be thinking about it on a regular basis.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you said 15, 20, 30 years, because that is how far out we look when we plan. And, the situation that we're in right now with the housing crisis or the housing crunch or whatever word you want to use for it, had we had these things in place 15, 20, 30 years ago, we might not be here.
Right.
And so working to solve them now, but also keep them from continuing on into the future is really important.
Yeah. And I think we've exhibited that this area, we're able to think forward thinking in terms of the way we do some planning, because when I have friends that come here and they look at our greenway and they look at our trail system and they're like, man, I can't believe you can literally ride your bike from one town to the next, to the next, to the next. And, I've taken people on trips from Fayetteville all the way up to Crystal Bridges on the trail. And it's like, I can't believe you can do this.
Yeah.
And that's some of the forward thinking that we have seen. And now we're trying to capitalize in some other areas that will serve our communities, will serve our kids, will serve our children's children really well down the road.
Agreed. And I'm grateful to prior city councils and to my predecessors, the mayors before me, that really made those investments in our greenway.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time, it wasn't, at least in 2005, it wasn't completely popular. And maybe not even in 2008, it wasn't always popular, but I think we've seen the benefit of it now. It's undeniable. And so, yeah, I'm grateful that there was that future planning for sure.
Yeah. We had Matt on this podcast several years ago talking about just the whole greenway and just the thinking that each city initiated to make it happen. And it takes a lot of people at the table to come up with something that makes sense that everybody can take advantage of.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, okay. Now I want to ask you, because this is really important. Why is now the right time for Fayetteville to take on this bond?
Now is the right time for Fayetteville to take on this bond because we have an opportunity to do it in a way that doesn't increase the amount of tax you pay. So right now we are closing the gap on our previous bond. There is around $40 million left outstanding. So that's why you'll see question 1 being a refinancing of the current outstanding sales tax bond. And that may sound like a lot of money, but that adds up really quickly. And so once that is paid off, we don't have the option to leverage that again and continue it for these projects. The sales tax would expire and we would have to go to the voters again. And at that point, we would be seeking to raise a tax, which I don't want to do. I think it is much easier for people to understand and also much more transparent to be able to say, we have been doing this. We are keeping it at the same rate as what you have been paying. It is not an increase. Let's do this now to make these investments. I will say something that I don't want to get lost in this conversation is that some of these items, particularly the water and sewer question, we don't have a choice but to make those upgrades. We have a choice about how we pay for them.
Yeah.
So right now we have a narrow window of time in which the state says we can go to the voters. In years past, people that have followed Fayetteville politics and special elections, you might have had a bond vote in June. The state legislature has changed the rules. There are only certain times a year when you can do it. Hence why it's really, really important that this happen in March. We're going to pay for those water and sewer upgrades in one way or another. If not through a sales tax bond, then unfortunately, it's going to show up in rate increases that you and I pay when we pay our water bill. And I would much rather share that increase with people that are visiting, with people that are not just Fayetteville residents, but everybody who comes to town who uses those resources, but everybody who buys something here has a piece in us improving that infrastructure as opposed to it just being on the residents of Fayetteville and the ratepayers.
And it's huge because Fayetteville has the benefit of the university. So we have thousands of people that descend upon that hill known as the University of Arkansas for games each weekend. Throughout the year. So there is plenty of opportunity for us to pick up and to get some help for the citizens of Fayetteville that benefit from this directly. But then everybody that is paying part of this sales tax is also helping out.
Yes, precisely. Well said.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, now I'm going to bring it up because this is something that has come up quite a bit. And I heard you on a couple of other programs talking about it. But let's have the conversation about the new aquatic center and the updated animal shelter. How will that impact day-to-day life in Fayetteville?
I'll start with the animal shelter first. We are currently operating out of an aging facility. It's more than 50 years old. It was not built with the intent of lasting this long. It wasn't built with modern amenities in mind or an eye towards growth. And we've outgrown it. And pets are increasingly a part of people's lives. And we want to be able to care for the animals that are brought to us at the animal shelter for whatever reason. And we want to be able to meet that need and that growing demand we have as we grow, where people can come and adopt their pets. Also, we are one of the only cities in the state that has a full-time veterinarian on staff, which allows us to provide an excellent standard of care for our animals, but that's increasingly hard to do in the space that they're in. So the animal shelter is very important. Again, something that people, you may not think about it, but when you need it, then it's there.
Well, I think about it all the time because even in the neighborhood that I live in and where I told you I'm in the Huntington neighborhood in Fayetteville, my neighbors love their pets. And everybody that I've run across, this is a very pet-centric area. It really is. That's why we have so many veterinarians and so many different spaces. But the city should have a place. And I've been down to that facility. It is a little long in the tooth.
That's putting it mildly.
Yes, but so there is room for improvement. But I think we could see the tangible benefits of investing some of our resources back into making that a really awesome facility.
Agreed. And hopefully meeting space as well for members of the public to be able to use to come in and enjoy the space. And the aquatic center. So that's one of my favorite things to talk about. Randy, people in Fayetteville have wanted a facility like this for a very long time. I can remember city council talking about this prior to the last bond in 2019, prior to the A&P bonds that were issued, I believe, in 2012. This is well over a decade, if not 2 decades, of people recognizing that we don't have adequate publicly owned facilities for water recreation. And that's not to say that the pool amenities that we do have at some of our nonprofits or even private areas or even places like the Boys and Girls Club where we have a relationship with, those are wonderful. And we are not in any way trying to not celebrate those resources, but we need a city-owned place that can keep up with the way that Fayetteville has grown. And we've seen aquatic centers go into cities throughout our region across the state. And not just, you've probably heard me say it, not just cities like Little Rock and Bentonville and Rogers, but I mean, Searcy and Harrison and Clarksville and Alma. I mean, really just even smaller cities recognizing that providing safe, accessible places for people to recreate and recreate in a healthy way is really an important part of civic life. And I want to note that I said accessible because there are many different ways to think about access. A couple of ways I think about access as it relates to the Aquatic Center is swimming is something that you can do it can be a lifelong sport, a lifelong hobby.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like football where maybe you've got a window of time where you could do it and then your body, you know, kind of screams at you. You can swim from a very, very young age, toddler age, all the way throughout the remainder of your life, hopefully. And so it can be a lifelong accessible hobby. Also accessibility in that it is very important to everyone at the city that this be built in a way that the cost is not a barrier for people who want to come and visit.
Yeah. And I think that's important. I mean, I won't get on my high horse about swimming. I actually went to college on a swimming scholarship. I
had no idea, Randy.
So swimming is important to me. My son, when we moved here, one of my sons was on the Aqua Hogs, and I made those trips up 265 to the Jones Center. Beautiful facility.
Yeah,
like
I'm
you
so
said,
glad they have it.
Bentonville. Yeah. I've been to every major pool here, and then I've been to every major pool from here to Little Rock, including Clarksville, which I might add, much smaller city than Fayetteville, and they have a beautiful facility. I went there one time, and I think it was a statewide meet, and I was just blown away by all the people there. And I was like, man, this is in Clarksville. And it's like, you know, and for those of you that don't know, Clarksville is that town that you drive through on the way to Little Rock, and their high school sits right on the highway.
Yep.
And you can see it. But I mean, Fayetteville needs to have something like that. And yes, I might be inclined to say I'm a little biased just because I was a swimmer. But, you know, I have an 80-year-old mother, and she gets into the pool. She gets into the pool on a regular basis. And that's the one thing that actually helps and staves off the arthritis that impacts her from time to time. And so I think even seniors will benefit from this.
Oh, 100%. I do not at all. I mean, so much has been talked about as it being a great space for families. And absolutely it is. But I also think about seniors as being just a very large user group, and knowing that, you know, indoor where you can go and do this year round.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even in days like this, maybe when it's snow on the ground.
Why not?
Go swim.
Yeah. Why not? So no, I think that's great. I just think it's something that we should, especially as residents, we should all be thinking about. This is another question that has come up, and I've heard this given to you and others in leadership in different ways, but I know a lot of residents, not a lot, but some are wary of continued development, right? Mm. And, you know, it's kind of the nature of where we are. We have a growing university right in our backyard. But how do you respond to those concerned about overbuilding or even losing Fayetteville's unique character? And I'm thinking of the Keep It Funky Fayetteville folks.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of them that are regular listeners to this podcast. And I would love for you maybe just to speak to that, because you are thinking about them as well when it comes to this bond.
Absolutely. I live in Fayetteville. We have raised our family in Fayetteville because we love this city's character. That is why we are here. And I don't want to lose that either. And I think sometimes people forget that it is a false choice to say, I remember hearing this in the campaign a lot. Well, I don't want Fayetteville to grow. Well, I can understand that. There are a lot of things that I don't want, right? But I live in the reality, and what I know is that we are growing. And so we have a responsibility to shape that growth, to make sure that that growth happens in a way that is not incongruent with our character, but that is aligned with our character, so that our building codes and our policies and our zoning and our land use, so that that is in a way that is in keeping with Fayetteville's values of accessibility, of wanting everyone to be able to take part, of safety, of equity. And so I think that our role here with anything is to shape that growth in a way that is consistent with our values. I don't want to overdevelop either. That's not what I want. I want to protect those natural spaces that are outside of the Fayetteville city limits so that we're using the land within inside the city, maximizing it as much as we can.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. And I mean, I think, when you look at this bond proposal, there is something for everyone in the way that this proposal is set up. And if you read it and if you go to the website for Build Fayetteville's Future, you can see that it's clearly laid out, which, I think is important for us to kind of get a better understanding of. But with that said, what role do you see residents playing in the city's future growth and infrastructure investments above and beyond voting for this and obviously spending your money in Fayetteville, which will support this effort?
Absolutely. Supporting local businesses. I'm glad that you said that. None of this happens in a vacuum. So these bond initiatives aren't developed by city staff or by some group of consultants. That's not how this works. These are developed in response to what we see as the growth that's happening, to where people are moving, to those growth patterns, to the decisions that our residents are making about where they want to live, and also what our residents are telling us that they want. A question that, we haven't touched on yet, question 3, Parks and Recreation, upgrades to our athletic fields and playgrounds, and also acquiring new land that we can preserve for an additional park. We have heard loud and clear from our Parks Board, which is made up of residents, just regular citizens. We have heard that is something they prioritize. And so when we see those comments, when we hear people speak on those issues at council, we take that to heart and we develop these as a response to that. And also as a response to data, fire and public safety. That's the other one that we didn't touch on. We will need a new fire station. We know that. We are growing. And so that's something that impacts, fire response time. God forbid we ever need it, Randy, and I hope that we don't. And I hate to think that anyone does, but at some point in time we might. And I want to make sure that they can get to me quickly and safely. Yeah,
well, absolutely. And I benefit from, we have almost a pretty new fire station that I can see right at the corner of Old Wire and Crossover in my neighborhood. But I want people on the west side of town to have a fire station over there that can benefit them. So.
I think Fayetteville is made up of people that understand a sense of community. At least that's the sense that I get of Fayetteville. And that's what I'm surrounded with. Just driving here, we still have some, at the time we're taping this, we still have some ice on the roads and some snow. And the number of people that I saw that were like jumping out of their cars to help someone that got stuck. I mean, we are a community that wants to help people and that understands that even if something does not benefit me directly every day, it doesn't mean that I don't want it for my fellow residents. I'm not a swimmer, Randy. I didn't know that about you, that you were. I'm not a swimmer, but I love that you are.
Yeah.
And I want you and your kids to have a place to go and swim.
Absolutely.
And I will come watch and say hello. Yes.
I like that. I like that. Well, there you go. All right. So this is the final question. And this is kind of where I want anyone listening to this that's taking notes and keeping receipts, as they say. What can voters do now to get informed and make their voices heard before March 3rd? And at the time of recording this, as you said, this is late January. So we have a little less than a month and a half before the vote. Not even a month and a half, maybe in a month and a couple of days before the actual vote. And it's a prolonged period, actually. So what can voters do now to get informed and make their voices heard before March 3rd?
So there are two different websites I'm going to encourage people to go to. One is led by a group of community members that are the volunteer fundraisers and boosters for this campaign for the bond, 1 cent, 1 city, 1 purpose. And it is buildfayettevillesfuture.com. It goes through each and every one of the 9 bond questions that will be on the ballot. So go and visit that website. Also go to the city's website, fayetteville-ar.gov, and you can read more about each question there as well. If you have questions, email them to us. Let us know. You can email mayor's office at fayetteville-ar.gov. If I don't have an answer, I will get an answer for you. Reach out to your council members in your ward. Ask them questions. Engage on social media, and hopefully we're keeping it thoughtful and keeping it kind, but we can have that respectful conversation there. If somebody posts something and you have a question about it, weigh in. Let us know. We want you to be armed. with all of the information. And tell your friends, voter turnout, and that's a whole different episode, Randy. You'll have to have me back. We'll just talk about voter turnout because, it's lower than we want it to be always, right? Across the country, in Arkansas in particular, even in Fayetteville. So many people, I guarantee you have 4 phone contacts right now of people that live in Fayetteville that don't know that there's a bond election on March 3rd. So if you were listening to this podcast, take a moment, text 3 of your friends, say, hey, go to this link, get educated about this.
Yeah.
And please come out and vote for Fayetteville's future. It's important.
Yeah. I've even encouraged, I have 2 voting age children, and I've already told them, I said, hey, we're all going together as a family to go vote. We're all going to the same polling station because we all live together, but this is what we're going to do. And I think, you bring up something that's really important, and you guys are listening to this. You heard it first from the mayor. If you want your voice to be heard, you have to get involved. And I think from a civic perspective, we need to, more than any other time in my history and my short time on this earth, I can't think of a better time for us to get involved with the politics of our local city, the politics of our region, of our state, and of the nation. And so I think it's important. Mayor Rawn is putting it out there for you. Get involved, ask questions. She gave you all of the contact information for ways to reach her at the mayor's office. We'll put all of that in the show notes. But Mayor Rawn, I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule on a really cold day to sit down with me and have this conversation. And I also want to just give you a shout out you ran a great campaign when you ran for mayor, and we're really glad to see you in this role. And we wish you, me being me, and, the team here at I Am Northwest Arkansas wish you nothing but continued success with Fayetteville and as you continue to grow. And also, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to the wonderful article, if anybody missed it, from the New York Times about the city of Fayetteville.
Oh, I was so proud of that. Wasn't that great?
It was great because I'm a subscriber to the New York Times.
Yes, me too.
And so for me, it was like, wow, I felt really proud. I shared it with all my friends around the country. I was like, see, that's why I live where I live. And
and there's it's just great coverage. And Peter Nierengarten, our city's sustainability director, does an incredible job. And so getting to brag on the work that he does, I certainly never thought that my photo would be in the New York Times. And I certainly didn't think that if it would be in front of a steaming compost facility.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
That was so fun and a real honor to get to participate in that interview for sure.
Absolutely. I think Fayetteville residents should be proud of what this city represents. We're not perfect, but no city is. And if nothing else, at least we're having discourse and dialogue to talk about the things that are most important to us, like this bond bill that we want to get passed on March 3rd. And so I really want to encourage folks to be aware of that and govern yourselves accordingly when it comes to getting out and voting for this. So Mayor Rawn, thank you again.
Thank you so much, Randy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, folks, that's a wrap on today's conversation with Mayor Molly Rawn. I hope this episode gives you a clearer understanding of what the 2026 bond proposal is all about and why your voice and your vote matter. Early voting begins February 17th and Election Day is March 3rd. To learn more about the bond proposal and explore the full list of projects, visit buildfayettevillesfuture.com. As always, thanks for listening to I Am Northwest Arkansas. Be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with your neighbors. Until next time, take care and keep showing up for the community we all call home. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.